all of a sudden he's there 24/7 or she's there 24/7. So there's no time you can call the shelter. If you call, he'll be there.
Tonight, domestic violence during a pandemic. How women's shelters in the Yukon are coping.
That kind of made me send out more messages just to clarify the misleading information of us Native people.
And tackling stereotypes. A Cree woman takes to TikTok to share her culture. Good evening, welcome to APTN National News. I'm Dennis Ward. Women are facing higher rates of violence during the COVID-19 pandemic. A national survey found 1 in 5 Indigenous women had experienced physical or psychological violence during the first 3 months of the pandemic. Sarah Connors has more.
Ketsia Hood-McLennan is the acting executive director of the Yukon Women's Transition Home, a shelter that's used mostly by Indigenous women. When the pandemic first hit the Yukon in March, Hood-McLennan says she saw a noticeable drop in visitors.
It was eerie because we had nobody. Like usually we're not always full, but we always have people. And all of a sudden in March, we had 1 woman in the shelter and no kids.
Hood-McLennan says for some women, the message to stay home meant being trapped with their abuser.
But then all of a sudden, he's there 24/7 or she's there 24/7. So there's no time you can call the shelter. If you call, he'll be there.
Earlier this year, the Native Women's Association of Canada surveyed 250 Indigenous women to see how they were being affected by COVID-19. What they found was a spike in the number of violent incidents, and that 1 in 5 women reported they had been a victim of either physical or psychological violence during the first 3 months of the pandemic. Cricket Wilder works at the Dawson Women's Shelter in Dawson City. She says some women using the shelter say they're experiencing more violence from their partners because of added stress caused by the pandemic, like income loss and job insecurity.
I've seen women who are already accessing our space for drop-in services of laundry and showers, telling us, feeling more comfortable telling us about the abuse and telling us that the abuse got worse because of COVID.
Wilder says with Indigenous women 3.5 times more likely to experience violence than non-Indigenous women, the virus has put more strain on an already vulnerable population.
Then when you add COVID on top of that, there becomes some really high risk factors, not being able to reach out, not being able to have those social connections.
Now she wants to see systemic change in the government, like a national childcare strategy, basic income, and affordable housing for women fleeing violence.
So that is my #1 call, is that the federal government commit to a federal strategy on ending gender-based violence. And that federal strategy looks like some really nuts and bolts things that don't seem really snazzy or full of glitter.
Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
In Ottawa, federal officials gave an update on COVID-19 vaccinations. It was announced that Canada now has deals for over 400 million doses of possible vaccinations, the first of which could be authorized for use in Canada by mid-December. Canada's Deputy Health Chief Howard New says if all goes well, Canada could receive the first shipments of 6 million doses of the vaccine in January. This initial shipment would go to the 3 million candidates identified as high priority groups. They include people with health conditions, essential workers, and Indigenous communities.
Those living or working conditions that put them at elevated risk of infection and where infection could have disproportionate consequences, including Indigenous communities. We're also actively engaging with national Indigenous organizations to discuss the appropriate and respectful rollout in their communities.
1492 Landback Lane today announced that they are appealing the Ontario Superior Court order for injunctions on their camps. For over 4 months, activists from Six Nations have occupied a site. It's been pegged for development on their unceded land. The Six Nations elected council signed off on the development in 2019, but the traditional Haudenosaunee government supports 1492 Landback Lane. In a prepared statement, spokesperson Skylar Williams contests that his arguments and evidence were wrongly thrown out by the Ontario judge.
We chose to engage in a process a process that is not our own, and to try and move it forward. And so for us, the issue of the land here is still before the courts, and it certainly needs to come to a nation-to-nation discussions, some actual dialogue with our community, because like right now, this is like what has been happening for the last 100 years now is absolutely infuriating for me and for many people from Six Nations.
Odelia Cusans has been in prison for more than 25 years. It's for a crime she says she didn't commit. She is now getting some high-profile help. But first, we meet one man in an upcoming episode of APTN Investigates who's been there since the day she was sentenced.
This is the courthouse where it took place. Yeah, it is really odd. But you know, I still remember it and I even remember now like being here 27 years ago when I was in here. I remember it plain as day.
Jay Cook sits in a Yorkton, Saskatchewan courtroom. It's summer 2020.
The prosecution was on that side, and Odelia and Norris, I think, were right here because there was two of them, so there couldn't have been just the one, like. I'm sure that's how it was.
He sat through every day of his partner Odelia's trial, listening to the horrific details of Joe Dahl's murder.
It was hard, really hard. There was a lot of violence in the case. I believe she didn't do it. I've seen her at her worst and I've seen her at her best, and she just wasn't that kind of person. She wouldn't do something like that.
A Life Sentence Part 2 airs tomorrow night, right here after the national news. Time to step aside for a quick break. Still to come, reaction to a study this week that found pipelines currently under construction may be unnecessary, a finding that some First Nations don't agree with.
We have to educate ourselves more. We have to understand what pipelines are and the regulations that are associated here in Canada.
Welcome back. This week, the Canada Energy Regulator released its 2020 energy future projections. And under one scenario, the Keystone and Trans Mountain pipelines might not be necessary. Chris Stewart gets reaction from some of the Indigenous groups that want a stake in those pipelines.
The report by the Canada Energy Regulator projects the country's energy usage until the year 2050. There are two main paths that they are projecting. One path, called the reference scenario, assumes that there are no more environmental policies put in place and oil demand continues to increase. The second is called the evolving scenario. This was calculated with more climate policies introduced, such as additional carbon taxes and improved technology from the oil sector. If the country follows the evolving scenario, oil demand peaks in the year 2039. This chart shown here shows that once the Enbridge Line 3 is fully operational, there could be enough pipeline capacity to carry all the oil needed, and the Keystone and Trans Mountain pipelines would not be needed. Darren Christie is the chief economist for the Canada Energy Regulator.
In the evolving scenario, which is the one where we see a continued pace of action on climate change and improving technology in the area of low carbon tech, you do see some years where there's a significant amount of capacity over and above what would move out of that area.
In the projected reference scenario, with the current environmental policies and continued oil demand, then both the Keystone and Trans Mountain pipelines would be needed to meet demand. Stephen Buffalo is the CEO of the Indian Resource Council. The council advocates for independently, indigenously owned oil ventures. He says even after this report, he recommends purchasing the Trans Mountain Pipeline.
You know, we have to educate ourselves more. We have to understand what pipelines are and the regulations that are associated here in Canada. You know, in my view, it's the safest way to move this natural resource. And there is a world demand.
Chief Michael Laburde is one of the heads of the Western Indigenous Pipeline Group. The group represents several Indigenous nations that want a stake in the Trans Mountain Pipeline. He says the demand is there today and down the road for Alberta oil.
Today we're building the pipeline. We do have customers for Alberta oil once it gets to Tidewater. And, you know, if we want to get to zero, I'm a big fan of reducing pollution. Heck yeah, let's reduce the heck out of pollution. However, you know, our oil seems to be a lot cleaner than what's being currently used in the markets. There should be a larger demand, a higher demand for cleaner Canadian oil.
He says this report will not stop his group from investing in the Trans Mountain Pipeline.
You tell them, I'll take it off their hands. Sell it to me. Sell it to me. That's your headline. Sell it to me. If it's not necessary, sell it to me. I will take that lemon off the Canadian taxpayers' hands.
The report says that even with the best case evolving scenario in 2050, 2/3 of Canada's energy will still come from oil. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
We spoke earlier with Reuben George of the Tsleil-Waututh First Nation near Vancouver. His community has been one of the bands fighting against TMX. Reuben, thanks for being with us. What are your thoughts on the CER report?
Well, you look at what Trudeau's climate bill he announced last week won't be met. You know, it's either our environment or his own pipeline. And what we've been saying all along is it just doesn't make sense. And that's what this report is saying. You know, from the very beginning when we presented to the National Energy Board when the flawed process where they hired ex-employees of Kinder Morgan to be part of the National Energy Board, we saw it was flawed and it was a big mess. And they tried to unscramble this egg and create this ministerial committee where we said again, it's a flawed process. Then we went to court and we've proven that it doesn't make sense and we forced them to go back to consultation. And then we just recently lost. But we adjusted during this time. We adjusted our economic assessments of this with our 1,200-page assessment, our economic analysis, and other work that we have done. Because at $80 a barrel, that's what they based their economic assessment on. It went down to $50 a barrel pre-COVID. During COVID, it went to -0, and now it's around $40 a barrel. So again, over and over and over again, to Tsleil-Waututh Nation, our allies have explained it doesn't make sense. There's a mass exodus of multiple businesses, insurance companies, banks, Enbridge divesting out of oil into renewable energies. The writing's on the wall, BP taking $17.5 billion of assets out of the tar sands. So everybody in the business sector knows that it doesn't make sense, and this is just another story that's sharing that it doesn't, and it's not too late. They only completed a small portion of the pipeline. What they should do right now is just stop.
Reuben, you know, this has been the message from you and your allies for years. Do you think this report will make much of a difference in the fight to stop the Trans Mountain expansion project?
It really should. It really should. And Canadians need to look at this. Like I said all along, when people understand the true facts of who the service and who benefits and the facts around jobs, the facts around the economics of it, the facts of the destruction that it creates, people will want to make better choices. 71% of Burnaby residents that we worked really hard with and with our allies to give proper education based on facts that it doesn't make sense, agreed with us. 71% of Burnaby residents agreed with the Tsleil-Waututh Nation and that this doesn't make sense. And so this is another moment that we can educate people on making sure that this doesn't happen, because it's not, when we've proven this economically, it doesn't make sense for the Tsleil-Waututh Nation, for Vancouver, British Columbia, and Canada.
Ruben, we'll have to leave it there, but do appreciate you joining us, Ruben George, Tsleil-Waututh Nation Sacred Trust.
All right, thank you.
Time now for a quick break, and then the story of a Cree woman who's blowing up on TikTok. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. It's of the rising sun on a cold morning just outside the Champaign-Ashai Band Office. That's up by Whitehorse, Yukon. Our viewer told us it was minus 25 degrees. And you can send us your pictures. You can email your shot to share@aptn.ca. And don't forget to include your name and where you're from. People want to know that too. We'll do our best to get them on the air. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, 10 above with showers for St. John's, 13 with rain in Halifax, +1 with a rain-snow mix for Nain, rain-snow mix and 4 above for Happy Valley Goose Bay. Showers and 7 in Montreal, +1 in Chibougamau. +6 in Ottawa, 3 for Sault Ste. Marie. +2 in Thunder Bay, snow and 4 below in Sioux Lookout. -16 for Churchill with snow, a rain-snow mix and -3 in God's Lake. +2 in Winnipeg, 5 above for Brandon. +1 in Saskatoon and North Battleford, showers and 3 in Regina. +2 in Meadow Lake, 0 with snow in Buffalo Narrows. Over in northern Alberta, -3 with snow for High Level and Fort Chipewyan. +4 in Medicine Hat, sunny, and 8 for Lethbridge. Showers and 9 for Vancouver, showers and 10 in Victoria. -7 in Fort Nelson, sunny and 9 below for Dease Lake. 18 below with snow in Old Crow, -2 in Whitehorse. Snow and -9 for Yellowknife. Flurries and 12 below in Norman Wells, -22 for Sachs Harbor, snow and 16 below for Inuvik. -17 in Whale Cove, 25 below for Cambridge Bay, -22 in snow in Resolute, flurries and 27 below in Joe Haven. A young Cree woman in Winnipeg is making headlines for promoting her culture through the video sharing platform TikTok. And now she's garnered the attention of popular American online publication. Brittany Hobson explains.
Hello, my name is Michelle and I'm a jingle dress dancer.
To family and friends, she's known as Michelle Chubb. But to her more than 300,000 followers on TikTok, she's also known as Indigenous Baddie. The 23-year-old Cree woman is gaining popularity for her educational and sometimes satirical videos on Indigenous culture. They have amassed more than 10 million likes since she created her account in January. Chubb says she turned to TikTok to dispel stereotypes.
There wasn't much Native representation on TikTok, and also people were representing us in a wrong way. So that kind of made me send out more messages just to clarify those misleading information about Native people.
Some of the videos include tutorials on how to bead or provide history lessons on the healing components of the jingle dress dance, while others poke fun at res life. But all are based on Chubb's own life experiences. She spent a lot of her life in Winnipeg and has ties to Bunbonabee and Pimachikamak Cree Nations in northern Manitoba, where her mushum instilled a deep love of their Cree culture in all his grandkids.
He showed a lot of us about important things in the traditional life and spiritual life.
The love she has for her culture has garnered attention from the popular online publication Teen Vogue. In the fall, they reached out to do a profile. Chubb was speechless.
Just kind of like, you know how when you open a present and you don't expect it, what you wanted? It's kind of like that. Yeah. Like a big surprise.
Since the article dropped last week, Chubb continues to make headlines. And while she's happy to continue showcasing her culture, she hopes to one day take it to the runway.
I do want to do some modeling. I'm hoping to get a model agency.
Brittany Hobson, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Well, many of us can't be with our families this holiday season. Purolator is trying to make gift giving from afar a little more special this year by collaborating with Canadian artists. Tamara Pimentel has that story.
If you're sending a holiday gift through Purolator, that gift may come in one of these boxes designed by Canadian artists. Purolator and Michaels partnered with 13 artists across the country.
I can't wait for people to put them under the trees and send them out and, connect with their loved ones, even though, not everyone can be together this year, but have a beautiful something to send in the mail.
Patrick Hunter and 3 other Indigenous artists are among those who designed a box to represent their own regions. In Saskatchewan, Chris Morin, Melanie Jewell in the Northwest Territories, and Inuk artist Megan Hunt from Nunavut will all have their work shared across the country. Hunter from Ontario created a floral print.
As gifts, I love to give a lot of mukluks and gloves, and they always have florals on them. A chance to share my culture with more people in Canada and more Canadians to be exposed to Indigenous culture, I think is what, my intention behind my work is all about these days.
The boxes will be available in early December at Purolator shipping centers and at Michaels locations nationwide.
And it's cool just to kind of just highlight that connection, and it can be done. They're kind of leading the way for other businesses to do, similar collaborations. And me being a gay Indigenous man, I think that said something too, that they're wanting to move forward in really, inclusive ways.
Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Calgary.
It's Thursday, and that means Nation to Nation is coming up right after the news. Here's host Todd Lamoran with a look.
Hello, I'm Todd Lamoran, and here's who we'll have as guests on Nation to Nation. Last week, Manitoba Métis Federation President David Chartrand targeted the Métis Nation of Ontario on how they are allowing people to become Métis who aren't part of the Métis homeland. Tonight, MNO President Margaret Froh tells me that many of Chartrand's statements are flat out wrong. Also, a Liberal backbencher's private member's bill about environmental racism is about to get a second reading. Lenore Zan will explain what that is, and her connection to comic book character Rogue of the X-Men. That's coming up right after the national news.
And Todd is just a few short minutes away with Nation to Nation. Looks like another good one. That is all the time we have for your APTN National News for this Thursday. For news anytime, visit our website, aptnnews.ca, and download the APTN News app. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great night.